So, officially running for president, what can you expect from Ron DeSantis? Folks, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and as always, trying to bring a fresh, different perspective to these political matters. Now, looking at it from the outside and doing a little bit of research and kind of having an idea of where things are at, let me know where you are in the comments below. Are you more on the Trump camp, DeSantis? You hate one guy, love the other? I really try to avoid being, that kind of a fanboy attitude of being, oh yeah, he's great, no, he's terrible. Well, based on what I see, honestly, they're really not all that different. And that may be good or bad depending on what you want. But at a core level, these are more of your classic, line of Republican, and there's not going to be a huge amount of difference. They may say one thing or the other more that you like more or less, but when it comes down to their actions, when it comes down to what they're likely to do, not all that different. You have, in terms of foreign policy, they both have done their mandatory trip to Israel, which one of the things that they have in common, Republicans, Democrats, they have their agendas that they will follow. They will tip the hat in the right direction, and that's signaling the kind of a foreign affair in what priorities they will have and some of the contracts that will continue to roll, and that is kind of where things always end up. Those contracts need to be signed, that military expense needs to be made so as to keep the economy going of a country that relies heavily on just that. Where you end up dropping the bombs, who do you end up giving them more or less, spreading the love all over the world as the United States is known to do? Well, kind of, more of the details. But in terms of a foreign policy, one of the things that I do see different in terms of Ron DeSantis, in the case of COVID, you definitely had a very hard line that Ron DeSantis followed with COVID that was quite different from what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump got in line with those big pharma companies, while Ron DeSantis took a hard line pretty much against that stance. He was very anti COVID mask, hardline vaccine agenda, and he was quite clear about that. I always found that very refreshing about him. I really liked what he did during the pandemic, and yeah, that's one of the things that I find positive about DeSantis, and maybe one of the things that I find most negative, his warp speed plan. That's one of the things that I really disliked quite a bit about Donald Trump. Also, his fight against wokeness. One of the differences, DeSantis served, as a lawyer, but well, he did serve. He had a deployment, if I remember correctly, SEAL Commander, Special Task Force in Fallujah. All right, so he did a little bit more of military service. Yeah, he's not a door kicker or anything like that, but you have a guy that did serve, unlike Donald Trump. Maybe that matters for you, maybe it doesn't, but it is there. I see him more as a more astute, clever politician. I think he's definitely better educated. He's less charismatic at times. Does that really matter? For some people, obviously it does. He is more of that cardboard type of personality, while on the other hand, Trump is more, bombastic and more of an entertainer, which, yeah, we know that he definitely is that. Now, one of the things that I see, and now getting more into the international aspect of this, is how he's being viewed from abroad. I just saw this again using the public German broadcasting channel so as to show you a little bit of how in Europe, in Germany specifically, they are kind of worried about DeSantis. Is that good? Is that bad? Well, let me know in the comments. But check this out.
Tell us more about who Ron DeSantis is and maybe more importantly, what he stands for.
Right. Ron DeSantis is a second-term governor who just won re-election in a landslide back in November. He's massively popular in his home state. but he's also really controversial. He is essentially the face of an emboldened, ultra-conservative wing of the Republican Party, and he's racked up an astonishing record of really draconian policies in his home state. He's severely restricted access to abortion. He has restricted sex and gender identity education in schools. He's tried to crack down on the teaching of, the U.S.'s very troubled history with race and slavery. And he's also gone really hard after the press. He's gone after the LGBTQ community. So he is really the face of a very conservative movement within the Republican Party.
You get the point. He's being presented in Europe as a far-right, anti-LGBTQ right kind of guy. That's the image they are presenting of him in Europe. And this would be one of the differences with Trump. Trump has never had that kind of strong conservative line in terms of family values and LGBT and gender studies and all this woke crap. He kind of flirts with the idea of being more based, but he's nowhere near as close to being as based as DeSantis is in this aspect. That's one of the things I like about him a lot more. Again, it's not just what you say, it's what you actually do. Trump did certain things during the pandemic. DeSantis did certain things during the pandemic. You may like one more than the other. He has done certain things in regards to Disney, which that's one of the things that Trump has never actually gone hard against. The woke agenda, the cultural Marxism, which I particularly find to be extremely toxic. And that's one of the things that, again, I like about DeSantis. Am I a DeSantis fanboy? Of course not. I'm not so blind about many of the things that I probably don't like so much about your traditional American politician, no matter what party he is. And someone that is very much an outsider, he's never going to be even close to getting elected. That's pretty much clear. But one of the things that I also find so interesting is that he's being presented through the media as a far-right, anti-woke politician, while at the same time, many of the countries in Europe that have had similar lines are not even considered far right. Sweden pulls back from gender affirmative care on minors. Good psychological care is fundamental. So they've gone back, reversed some of this gender affirmative crap for little children, which makes perfect sense. And this is in Sweden. If you have a liberal country in Europe, Sweden would be it. But at the same time, it's also interesting to see how Sweden was one of the countries that didn't go for this lockdown during the pandemic. So they have this more of a liberal aspect, but not liberal in terms of this kind of thing, the cultural, Marxist, liberal, gender kind of thing. They're a little bit more objective and scientific in seeing that, you know what? No, we don't have to reaffirm gender in children because they're children. They're probably developing and still forming their minds and their bodies, and it makes no sense to do this. Another perfect example of what I'm talking about here is Switzerland. Switzerland officially said, as in by damn law, there's only two genders. There's no third gender. Cut that crap. We won't take any of that. This would be insanity in the United States. If you had by law saying there's only two genders, cities would burn across the United States. Yet in Switzerland, in Europe, a country said, screw that. There's only two genders. You can either be a man or a woman. There's no third option. Officially, there's no third option. Unlike neighboring Germany and Austria, people in Switzerland are entered into the civil registry as male or female, with no other option available, because it is a biological fact of nature that you're either a male or a female, and that's it. There's no room for any kind of bullshit, no third option, even less so infinite amount of possible genders in a rainbow of crap. And yet these are things, and in terms of abortion, same thing. most countries across Europe have what you would consider very restrictive abortion laws in terms of how far you can actually go along with it, in what term you are, how many weeks into it you're allowed to get an abortion or not. You would find those to be a lot more conservative and a lot more restricted in most European countries than in most US states. And yet, they present a guy like DeSantis as a far-right, ultra-based conservative, which is definitely not the case, but that's the view they want you to have of him in the rest of the world. Folks, I hope that kind of gave you a little bit of a perspective of where we are in terms of Ron DeSantis. You know, either one. I'm still looking into this, and by what I see so far, I see that the left is panicking a lot more at the idea of this guy being president than Donald Trump. They already know what they get with Donald Trump, and they're kind of okay with that. Of course, they want Democrats to win, no doubt, but they're trying to demonize this guy, and that just makes me probably want him to end up being elected a lot more. See you on our next video. Take care, guys.